Hi, everyone. Welcome to your second lecture in R. If you have not yet watched the first lecture, which shows you how to install packages in R, please be sure to go back and do so. Once again, we're going to be using the ggplot library. For this lecture, we're going to be using another dataset that comes in ggplot called diamonds. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to use the argument summary and then call the dataset. Down here, you see each of the variables that are included in the diamonds dataset. We can see that it includes quantitative data like carat, depth, table, and price, but also qualitative data such as the cut, the color, and the clarity. Let's build a box plot of the carat data using ggplots 2. The first thing I'm going to need to do is tell R that I want to use the package ggplots2. Now, even though the library is called ggplots2, the command is actually just ggplot. The next thing I need to do is tell R what data it should be looking at. So I need to tell it we're going to be looking at diamonds. After the word diamonds, which is your data set, insert a comma. Next, in order to build a box plot, we're going to need to tell R what quantitative variable we want to be represented by the y-axis of our box plot. To do this, we're going to use an aesthetic argument. That argument is AES, short for aesthetic. And in that aesthetic argument, we're going to tell R that the y-axis range is going to be equal to the variable carat. So again, we've told R we're going to use ggplot on the dataset diamonds such that aesthetically, what should be plotted is some sort of chart such that the y-axis is equal to the numbers in the carat variable. Now, I need to do one more thing. Thinking back to your ggplot cheat sheet, I now need to tell R what sort of chart I want to build. To do that, I'm going to add to our code the command g-on-boxplot. A little hint about R. When something goes wrong with your code, the first thing to check is to make sure that every set of parentheses that you've opened has been closed again. Let's run this line of code and see what we get. And look at that. We've got a box plot. Here are Q1, Q2, and Q3 lines, our whiskers, and some outliers. Let's imagine that this isn't informative enough. Say, for example, we want to know how carat compares across the different colors of diamonds in this data set. In other words, we want this y-axis down here to represent the different colored diamond options. Well, to do that, all we have to do is to go back into our code and tell R what we want on our x-axis. Think back to math. In your math classes, you always included your x variable, then your y variable. So here we're doing the same thing back in this aesthetic argument where we are telling R what we want it to produce. We're going to now give it an x value. X equals the variable color, comma, space. Now if we run this code, what happens? Why, look at that. We've got our y data right here, just as it's always been, but now our x-axis represents these different colors of diamonds. What if we thought this was too plain? What if we also wanted each of these different box and whiskers plots to be a different color? Well, we can do that. Here, back in our aesthetics argument, we have the option of always including a color variable where we assign the color scheme used in our chart to a categorical variable. Now, this is a little weird because the argument is color and the variable is also color. So I'm going to tell R that the colors it uses should vary according to the color variable. And when I do that, look, it follows the spectrum. We have a purple, indigo, blue, lighter blue, green, lighter green, and yellow. But that's not very pretty. And in fact, over here, this yellow box plot is kind of hard to see. So what if we don't want the color of our actual Box and Whisker plots to change, but instead we want the fill color to change? We can go back here to our aesthetic argument and tell our, no, wait, I changed my mind. I don't want the color of the plot itself to change. I want the fill color of those plots to change. And if we do that, this looks better. I can actually see things clearly. You can also make aesthetic changes over in the gonboxplot command. So for example, in this case, we have the outliers, which are unique to the Box and Whisker plot. So here, I could tell R that I want the outlier color to be different. And I want it to be, let's say, red. Now here's something strange about R. If you're ever going to assign a specific color, you have to put it in a set of quotation marks. You can't just type the name of the color. What happens now if I run this? Why, look. All of our outliers are now in red. Now, why would you want to do a thing like that? Well, if you're interested only in Q1, Q2, and Q3, you wouldn't. But if for some reason the message you need to convey to your audience is the range or the quantity of outliers, then it would make a lot of sense to make the outliers a bold, bright color. You can also make aesthetic changes to them in R by changing their shape. Say you want to make them diamonds or X's. And you can also change their size. For example, let's say that I want to really bring attention to these outliers. So I want to change the size to size 5. Now that's probably too big because they're running into each other. But I hope this demonstrates just how easy it is to make changes to your baseline plots in R. If you have questions about any of the things we've done this week, please don't hesitate to reach out.